Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm here today with you for another solo episode. There'll be a few more solo episodes coming your way in the next couple of weeks before I start to have guests on again joining me here. And this week's episode is going to be dropping us into the energies and the history and the significance of the autumn equinox, which is coming up this weekend. It's happening late on Saturday, the 21st, or very early morning on the 22nd, depending on what time zone you're in. So really the weekend is encapsulating this equinox, this turn of the wheel of the year. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history around this celebration. I'm going to read you a little bit of a story, a very brief story, about a figure from Celtic mythology that we can tap into as we work with the energies of this season. And I hope that you find this reflection useful. Personally, have really been noticing and enjoying the turn to autumn weather. It's really noticeable in Calgary, where I live, in the last couple of weeks, but especially in the last few days. I'm recording this on Friday, the 13th, the day of the goddess. I might touch on that too. But yesterday I woke up to overcast skies and rain, and it was dark and chilly and so cozy in my house. And today the earth smells so fresh and there's that crispness in the air. The rowan trees have berries abundantly upon them, ripening. The rose bushes between my house and my neighbors are heavy with rose hips. I'm very excited to harvest when they are fully ripe. And it's interesting because when I was young, I didn't appreciate fall. It's a very fleeting season here in Alberta where I live. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month. The last few years, it's been a longer season, and I'm grateful for this, but also aware of the fact that it's an indication of shifting climates, which comes with its own sense of disturbance. However, the more that I lean into the seasonal shifts in energy, the more that I am aware of the magic and the subtlety of those energetic shifts. So if you are able today, perhaps while you're listening to this even, to step outside and simply notice the environment around you. Notice the trees, the grass, the birds, the berries. There's signs all over of the shift, and perhaps it's not fully come to where you are. Perhaps autumn comes a little later in your part of the world, or perhaps it's already very much in full swing. And just that practice of noticing is so potent. The time of the equinox is really the entrance into that dark half of the year. We have that equinox, equal night, that moment in our year, there are two of them, where the night and the day are in balance. And so the energetic themes of this time really hinge on that balance, the balance between light and dark, the balance between yin and yang energies, outward, inward, the balance between the feminine and the masculine energies in the world as well. And a good question to sit with as we are in this season is that inward questioning of where might I need to create or find more balance in my life? And balance is never a standstill point. Often when we think of balance, we think of equality, which is part of the theme. But balance is shifting, right? We have one day where the balance exists between light and dark, and then it tips. And the dark is a little longer than the night, and that is all as it should be. And so rather than being a rigid fixed point, it's ebbing and flowing. It's finding the balance in the moment, in the space, in that sphere of life, wherever you happen to be. This celebration is a time of harvest. And so it's again a bit of a balance between this preparing to go inwards, this energetic slowing. We're harvesting the fruits. They're no longer abundantly growing. We're bringing them in from the fields. We're harvesting the fruits of our labors over the course of the spring and summer from the seeds that we planted back at Imbolc and Ostera. And we're processing these. We're taking stock. We're seeing if we have enough, what we need. We're also revisiting, what didn't grow as we hoped it might, or at all. Perhaps the soil wasn't enough to sustain those seeds. Perhaps the weather was inclement. Perhaps we just planted something that doesn't work in our environment. And obviously, as I say these are metaphors. They're real too if you garden, if you're a farmer or a gardener, but they're also that inner landscape metaphor that we always come back to here on the Woo Curious podcast. And so there is that sense of taking stock at this time of year. This celebration, this marking of this moment, it predates the Celtic calendar. We have sacred places in Ireland. I'm going to butcher the names, so I'm not going to say them. I think one is called Noth. It's probably not how it's pronounced. But that these sacred structures that line up, they've got long corridors that line up exactly with the light on these equinoxes. It's the only 2 days of the year where the corridors are lit all the way through these long corridors. So we know that this is an ancient, symbolic and significant time. We also have festivals, harvest festivals around the world. In China, we have the Mid-Autumn Festival, which falls on the harvest moon. In Germany and Germanic areas, for instance, we have Oktoberfest that came into being in the 1700s. In ancient Greece, we have festivals including the Eleusinian Mysteries, which tell the story of Persephone, who is in the underworld, in the dark, for 6 months of the year, the cycle of death and rebirth being enacted all over the world. And through most of Europe, the harvest home is what it might have been called. You may also have heard me and others refer to this celebration as Mabon. And this name is quite modern, quite recent. It's a Wiccan, not invention. It's pulled from a Welsh deity or Welsh mythical figure. And it was applied to the autumn equinox in the 1970s, roughly. So I use it interchangeably with the autumn equinox. It's easier to put in writing. It's shorter, fits prettier on the Instagram grid. But as I learn more and align myself more with the Celtic calendar and the Celtic wheel of the year, I'm straying away from using the term Mabon because it is such a recent invention. Some of the associations with this time of year are, we've got the harvest, so fruits of the harvest are very associated with Mabon. Apples are of particular significance, and the apple tree is the tree in the Ogham calendar, which is an ancient Celtic calendar that is associated with the month of September. This is a 13-month calendar. It's a lunar calendar, so it shifts a little bit every year, but that apple is so abundant right now. It's also a sign of wisdom. It's connected to the other world. It's in the same family as the rose, and so beauty and wisdom are associated with the apple tree. So it's a great time to have apples, make apple pie, and all of those kinds of things. The colors of the season are the ones that you think of. Autumn colors, those golds and reds and browns and those rich autumnal colors. When we think about the energies and preparing for the winter, we have this back to school energy, this return to routine, this preparing and putting the systems in place that will sustain us over the winter, this clearing of our spaces. I mentioned that last week on the podcast as well, that autumn cleaning is akin to spring cleaning in a lot of ways. There's that mirror there. Spring equinox, we're cleaning out the dust that accumulated over the winter. Autumn equinox, we're cleaning up and tidying up and purging so that our inner landscapes and our homes where we will be over the winter are clear and clean and provide us space and ease and time for dreaming and going inward. I would like to read from the book that accompanies my Rooted Woman Oracle deck. The story, the brief story, but more importantly, the lesson of Rhiannon for this time. Sharon Blackie, you'll have heard me mention her before. She wrote If Women Rose Rooted, and she's, really knowledgeable and drops into the myths, the Celtic myths, and how those can connect us back to the land and the wisdom in our bodies and the cycles of nature. And so in her course, Sisters of Root and Rock, which I am part of, she links a story with each turn of the wheel of the year. And she goes into great depth with the story of Rhiannon there. And I'm not going to read that for you here, but I am going to read you the oracle card, because a big part of turning to autumn and moving into this part of the year is, as I mentioned, that revisiting what didn't work, or perhaps what growth needs to be cut back to lay around the roots of the plants to protect them from the drastic temperature changes that are coming to act as a layer of not only mulch and protection, but of fertile compost for next year. And so part of what we're doing at this time of year is taking stock. We're separating the wheat from the chaff. The chaff goes back onto the fields to fertilize it, to protect it, to return nourishment to the land. And so part of what we're doing energetically at this time is just that, creating time and space to turn inwards, to assess, to release what is no longer serving, so that we may allow it to fertilize, to nourish, and to protect that which is yet to come. So the story of Rhiannon, and I did look up the Welsh pronunciations. However, I may still butcher them. If you speak Welsh, I am sorry. But here we go. In the Old Welsh text, the Mabinogion, Rhiannon, another representative of the goddess sovereignty, rides out of the otherworld on a white horse to take Duvet's king, Push, as her husband. She's feisty and resourceful, and at first, she sets the pace in their relationship and seems to hold all the power. But Rhiannon is distrusted by the people of Duvet, betrayed by her own women, and doubted by her husband. A woman in her power being doubted and betrayed? Interesting. She's wrongly accused of killing and eating her own son, and her penance is to tell the false story of her great sin to all who come to Duvet's court. Eventually, her son is found, and her own true story can emerge. Like Rhiannon, we must remember and uphold our own truths as we progress along our heroine's journey. We must always insist on telling our own stories ourselves. These stories emerge directly from our own authentic lived experience. During the course of a lifetime, each of us will encounter stories that are told about us and against us by others, and some of them will become so deeply interwoven into the fabric of our everyday lives that unpicking them can be hard. Rhiannon then is an ally who helps us to discern and uphold the stories about our lives which we believe to be true. the stories which come from our own beautiful hearts and from the ways of being and enduring that are unique to us alone. As I read through this story, this reminder in preparation for this episode, the question that popped into my mind for reflection, for me, for you, for all of us, is what stories are you telling about yourself that aren't true? And this ties in absolutely beautifully with the week of returning to your worthiness that I am currently hosting. If you are hearing this before the 29th, there's still time to register for and catch the replays of Root, which is a guided journey to step into your worth. If you're hearing this before the 19th, you can still catch us live. We're going live every day from the 16th to the 19th on this guided journey. And it's really getting at that heart, the root of that story of unworthiness that so many of us have operating, even at the subconscious level often. I think most of us, if you asked, are you worthy of happiness? You'd say, yes, of course I am. And then there would probably be this little voice somewhere deep inside going, are you really though? Have you done enough? Are you good enough? Have you served enough? That little voice, that self-critical inner judge that has been passed down through generations and reinforced by the patriarchy and capitalism. And so let's take Rhiannon as a guide, as a wise mentor, and begin to write our own stories as we enter into the autumn season, autumn equinox. I am also holding ceremony to celebrate the autumn equinox. That's on the 20th in the evening. It's a hybrid ceremony, both online and in person. You are cordially invited to join me. There will be links in the show notes to join both Root and for the autumn equinox ceremony. I always delight in holding this space for women to gather in circle. And I actually just read yesterday, I think, about a study that looked at longevity in humans and found that women who gather, this applies to men too, there's just fewer examples of it, but in communities or within groups of women who gather together frequently in sisterhood, women live longer in those places. And so if that isn't an encouragement to come and join a ceremony or two or all of them, I don't know what is. It's something that has been reflected in the feedback from the other guided journeys that I've offered this year as well, Bloom and Shine. Some of the comments have always been from the women attending that they really enjoyed spending that week in community with other like-minded souls. So if you haven't yet signed up for Root, please join us, even if you just have to catch the replays. That space, that energy is still there. It's held. It is a place where you get to see that your struggles, your worries, your thought patterns, they belong to you and they do not. And you are not alone in holding them. That sense of belonging and of not being the only one is really, really powerful. So I would love to see you there. I would love to see you in ceremony if you're listening to this in time. And if you're not, know that I hold these ceremonies for each of the wheel of the year, each turning of the wheel. So that's 8 times a year. And that's always available. The information is always available on my website under Wheel of the Year Ceremonies to find if you're keen to join. And with that, my dear Woo Crew, my dear kindred souls, thank you so much for listening today, for being here with me, just for spending some of your time, of your day here in this space, learning about the autumn equinox, reflecting on the story of Rhiannon, and maybe you'll set aside a little bit of time this week or today to reflect on what it is that you are going to let fall as we enter the season of autumn, as we move into the dark and still half of the year, the half of the year that society doesn't recognize as being as valuable because it's not productive. I'd love to hear what bubbles up for you as you sit with these reflections. As always, you can find me over on Instagram at I am Eileen March. You can send me an email, Eileen@myluminous.life. Reach out, leave a comment below this, and please leave a rating and a review if you enjoy this. Tell your friends. It helps ever so much. Until next week.